All right, and welcome back to Calling Out Controversy on WVCR 88.3 The Saint. Tonight, our guest is Governor Mike Dukakis. Governor Dukakis, thanks for being with us.
Good to be with you.
So, why don't you start us off by just telling us a little bit about yourself?
That's a long story. Well, I'm the son of Greek immigrants who came here in 1912 and 13 separately as kids, and were pretty remarkable, both of them. My dad was 15 when he arrived here, didn't speak the language, didn't have a nickel in his pocket, had a couple of brothers working in the textile mills up in Lowell and Lawrence, and amazingly went to medical school, became a doctor. I mean, how he did it, I have no idea. And was well known in the community, and especially among the Greek community, but others as well. My mother came over here when she was 9, and was the first Greek girl, so far as we can determine, to go to college unescorted. It was unheard of at the time, and graduated from Bates College in 1925. So I was blessed with a couple of really wonderful parents, each of whom in their own way were reflective of the American dream, and unquestionably had a big influence on me, although neither one of them was, they were interested in what was going on in the world, and the CBS World News Roundup on radio was on at 6 o'clock every night. So obviously that had something to do with my getting involved politically. But from a very early age, Justin, I was interested, and particularly in what I saw as a lot of injustice going on around us. The racial thing at the time was terrible. I mean, we live in the town of Brookline, still do. Kitty and I both grew up here. But you know, people of color could not live in the town of Brookline, 3 miles from downtown Boston, literally. I think we had three black families. 2 of them were janitors, and the third was a well-known and world-renowned tenor who somehow got somebody to sell him a house in Brookline. That was it. And this is 3 miles from downtown Boston. There was a lot of anti-Semitism around. I mean, we're still struggling with this problem, but it was really bad at the time. And for whatever reason, even as a kid, I kind of rebelled at this. It bothered the hell out of me. And one thing led to another. I got interested in politics, went to Swarthmore College, which I'd never heard of, outside of Philadelphia. I'd never heard of it. It was my brother who was at Bates at the time and said, you ought to take a look at Swarthmore. I was a pretty good athlete, wanted to play some small college ball and that kind of stuff. So I ended up at Swarthmore, right in the middle of the Joe McCarthy era. And from that point on, I got deeply and actively involved in politics. Was in the military, was in Korea for 16 months, came back, went to law school, and got deeply and actively involved in local politics. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Well, I mean, during your talk about yourself there, you hit on one kind of epitome that is still reigning true today, and that is race in politics today. And you were the target of some, well, I mean, some people would like to say racist ads or racial messaging, being the Willie Horton ads. And it's still stuff that's being talked about today in whether it be political science classes or history classes or just on TV or regular talks. And what is your opinion on it today? Because today kind of seems for some to be more explicit than in the past, especially in the rise of Black Lives Matter and protests across the country. Do you see it shifting today, or do you see it kind of being the same as it was back when you ran for president back in
No,
1989?
no, it's not. It's not the same. I mean, the public awareness is greater. There's a lot more public opposition to this kind of injustice. but it continues, and there's a reason for it. I mean, it all started with slavery, and it's been part of this country's history. But I can tell you that despite the fact that we still have problems, things are a heck of a lot better now than they were, at least when I was growing up. And when I tell you that people of color could not live in my town, I'm not kidding. I mean, it was bad. And don't ask me why I kind of instinctively reacted to this, but I did. And it had a lot to do with my getting involved politically and getting involved in civil rights work, among other things. And have we made progress since those days? Yes, we have. Have we still got more to do? Yep, we've got more to do.
What was kind of your reaction when you saw the Willie Horton ads or the subsequent ads that came after that basically said, like, Dukakis on crime, Dukakis is soft on crime, we can't afford that risk?
I did not, unfortunately, I did not do a very effective job of dealing with it. I made a decision, which turned out to be one of the worst decisions of my life, that I would simply not respond to the Bush attack campaign. And that was a mistake. You can't do that. I mean, if somebody's going to come at you with that kind of stuff, you've got to be ready for it, and you've got to try to turn it into a character issue on the guy that's doing it. And I simply said, no, I'm not going to comment on it. And that didn't work very well, particularly because, among other things, I was from Boston. Bush was from Houston. I think the homicide rate in Houston was 6 times the homicide rate in Boston. Massachusetts has the lowest homicide rate in the country, and it's not because we're nicer or better. We believe in community policing. We work hard at it. We've had some leaders in this community that were particularly effective in that. And I think I can say to you, not that everything's perfect, but that policing around here is very different from what it was when I was growing up, and much, much better. Are other parts of the country making the same progress? Depends. But no question in my mind that we've made very substantial progress, but we have more to do, no question about it.
Yeah, and it kind of became the focus of the whole entire election in 88, 89 was crime, especially due to the work of the ad campaigns used by Lee Atwater and and Roger Ailes and his other campaign men. And it's kind of just like how in 2020 the main focus became racial justice and Corona, basically because those were the things that were most in the forefront for the country, especially because of how Corona and the murders and everything with George Floyd impacted the country almost on a weekly basis. And it was kind of just like that where, although this wasn't framed by a campaign in 2020, Bush was able to frame it in 1988.
Yeah, but I do fault myself for not being more prepared to deal with that. I could and should have done a much better job of dealing with it under the circumstances, and that's one of the things that happens. I mean, nobody runs a perfect campaign.
No.
And although I think we ran an excellent primary campaign, I mean, there were 7 candidates, and most of them are familiar names. One of them was Joe Biden, who I like a lot, and who I think is going to be a fine president in a very difficult situation. But we had some good folks running, and I was able to win that primary, but did not do an effective job in the final, unfortunately, because I didn't really have a carefully thought out strategy for dealing with the kinds of attacks we were getting from Bush. And there's no question that there were, race was an issue, no question about it.
Yeah, and then it also went to one of the debates with Bush that you had, where they asked you a question that some will kind of say it was kind of like the Achilles heel moment for your campaign, when they asked you, would you seek the death penalty if somebody murdered your wife, and you said
Right.
you wouldn't. Is that
Right.
something that you now, looking back in hindsight, regret, or is it something that you would still do the same if it was
No.
done today?
I mean, look, I've always been an opponent of the death penalty, and I wasn't going to change my mind in the middle of a debate. Um, Here again, however, I think I could have done a much more effective job of dealing with the issue. I mean, just to go back to what I said before, when you're running against a guy who comes from a city whose homicide rate is 6 times yours, you ought, you ought to do something with that information. And I didn't, and I should have.
But couldn't also, just to play a little bit of devil's advocate here, couldn't somebody also say that Bush wouldn't have an impact on that rate at all because Bush was vice president? Before that, he was head of the CIA. He didn't have any impact or influence really as like a mayor or governor would
Well,
have.
but he was he was an important public official. He came out of that community, and I think raising that issue and arguing for the death penalty under the circumstances is something that I should have dealt with far more effectively than I did. And that was my fault. I mean, there's no question, I think, that he was vulnerable in the issue. I mean, again, remember, he comes from a city with a homicide rate 6 times my city. Should have done a better job of it.
Yeah, and then so I just want to move on a little bit to the election of 2020 because that's the main topic of what we're here to discuss today.
Right.
So when you look at the election of 2020, I mean, we're still in 2020, going into 2021 right now. What do you think will be the key takeaways from this election?
Well, first, I think there's something wrong with Trump, mentally, psychologically. He's a very strange guy, and I'm not sure we've ever had anybody quite like him. I mean, we've had lots of contests for the presidency, and some of them were good, some of them not so good, and so on and so forth. But this guy's a pathological liar. He's a strange guy. I think I think he's got some problems. And at least in my lifetime, I don't remember anything quite like this. And I think Biden did a very good job, and the Democrats did a very good job of dealing with it. But it's nothing that I can remember I've ever encountered. And regrettably, we don't know, of course. I don't think Trump is going to go away. That's just not the kind of guy he is. So we're going to have to deal with him along with some very serious problems. One of them is the virus. Another is the economy affected by the virus. And the third is a world that still can't seem to resolve its problems and settle them peacefully. And I hope one of the things that Joe will do is to see if we can get back to a foreign policy that makes sense, that brings people together, that recognizes that the human race has serious problems that have to be resolved, and they're not going to be resolved with weapons. They're going to be resolved by sitting down together and working them out. And fortunately, that's the kind of guy he is. So I'm reasonably optimistic that we can make some progress. But the Trump foreign policy was a disaster, and I hope we never go back to that again.
All right, and then so another thing that a lot of people thought was interesting was that although the Republicans lost the presidency where Trump lost, they had considerable gains in, for instance, the House of Representatives, and the Democrats who were basically looking to win seats like Maine, North Carolina, and Iowa, and even South Carolina with Lindsey Graham. They weren't able to kind of play the field like they wanted to, and they barely hung on to their majority in the House. Like, what do you think would be the lesson for Democrats to learn from all this? If they were able to take down Trump, yes, and that was one of their goals, but they weren't able to hold on or even gain like they wanted to.
Well, politics is tough, and winning elections is tough, and we were running against a guy who had, for reasons I don't understand, some considerable appeal to people, even though I think he's a strange and how can I put it? Not a worthy candidate. I mean, Trump is a guy that he's a pathological liar. He's all kinds of things, and he still got a significant vote. What does that tell us? It tells us that good people, whether Republicans, Democrats, or Independents, have got to work very hard to win elections. And I'm delighted that Joe won this one, but you're right, it wasn't reflected up and down the line the way we hoped it would be, and that just means we've got to work harder.
Okay, so I mean, it kind of also can say for some is that there were many who were motivated, because I know even some moderate Republicans who were just like, I can't stand Trump, but I'll still vote for any Republican. I just can't stand Trump. So would you think that there were some people who just voted for Biden as president, but then down ballot just went Republican, or
Yes,
just didn't show up?
I think there's no question about that. That they couldn't stand voting for Trump, but otherwise were moderate folks who in their local elections were, if not down the line Republicans, at least independents and willing to look at the field in that way. So I think that had a lot to do with the results.
Yeah,
fortunately, the big one was the presidency, and fortunately, Trump is going to be leaving no matter what he says. But his performance since the election is just a reflection of the strangeness of this guy, and I hope he's going to leave politics for good, but I'm not sure that's going to happen.
Here on WVCR 88.3 St. calling out controversy Governor Michael Dukakis. So he's already made it seem that he's going to run in 2024.
I guess. It's not entirely clear, but he's certainly talking about it.
Yeah, he's made a few instances of it, and there's some talk he's even going to hold a fundraiser on the day of the inauguration. And so we'll see what happens there. I mean, what do you think will be, since we've already talked about the main lesson for the Democrats, what do you think will be the main lesson for Republicans moving forward from all this?
Well, Trump so dominated the Republican approach to this, and still is. I mean, can you imagine hundreds, dozens and dozens of Republican members of Congress supporting the guy, even after he loses, and arguing that somehow he really had won, which is absurd. This was probably one of the best run and fairest elections we've ever had. I mean, it was remarkable, and the people at the state and local level who made that possible deserve enormous credit, whether they're Republicans or Democrats. I mean, they really did a remarkable job of running an honest and well-run presidential election. But if, in fact, Trump insists on staying in this, as I guess he will, he's going to be a problem, no question about it. And whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, if you're as upset as I am with the guy, the way he ran, what he says, what he does, how he does it, you've got to take it very, very seriously.
Yeah, and I also remember going into late in the night on election night when it looked like we were going to be going into counting into the next few days. I remember texting a Republican lawyer that I know who worked on the 2000 recount, and I asked him when it looked like it was going to be going like into some sort of lawsuits for the Republicans or anything else, and I asked him, "Do you think this will be as bad as 2000, or do you think this will be like 2000 and all?" And he responded, "It will be worse." And I said, "Why do you think it'll be worse?" He said, "Well, because we're facing litigation in multiple states, and now you see Rudy Giuliani with his band of lawyers going around to each different state and trying to throw out ballots or get recounts or not get them to certify the elections or what have you."
Well, none of that worked, and it didn't work because there was nothing to it. And in fact, the folks at the national level, as well as secretaries of state and local officials and so forth at the state and local level, did a remarkable job of running. This was one of the best run elections I can remember. And they deserve a lot of credit for that, Republicans and Democrats alike. And it just turned out that Giuliani and his people had no, no, not only no support in the courts, but these suits were almost uniformly thrown out because they were so baseless. And that's the reason that we're going to have a new president. And more power to the local officials in both parties who were responsible for those elections. I think they did a wonderful job.
And I just wanted to talk to you a little about how Biden ran his campaign, where Biden basically, as some people joked, was the old man in the basement. He pretty much, it's something we haven't seen since William McKinley ran his front porch campaign in the late 19th, early 20th century. And it's something where before this election, people would have looked at him and said, like, who does he think he is? Why is he not out here campaigning? But in 2020, it was acceptable due to COVID. Do you think that kind of sets a standard for elections in the future, or do you think this will just be kind of like a one-time thing due to COVID?
I think it's a one-time thing, assuming that the vaccine works as it seems it's the process of beginning to work, and we can get back to normal. I'm a huge believer in precinct-based grassroots organizing. And we simply weren't able to do that anywhere near as much as we had hoped. But I don't think assuming all goes well with the virus and vaccination and so forth, which I think it will, I think we'll go back to what I hope is a much more grassroots-oriented approach to this. But you can't blame Biden for not running around from house to house and door to door at a time when you've got this terrible disease that's killing people, and it's now killed in excess of, 300,000 people. But I think if all goes well and the vaccine works as it appears to be, and the process of working, I think we'll be back to a more conventional and traditional and grassroots organizing kind of politics, and that will be a good thing. Obviously, this was a very unusual state of affairs.
So do you think we won't hold anything back from the 2020 election, that would all just go in 2024 and 2022 back to normal campaigning like we've seen in the past, in like 2018, 2016?
Yeah, I think we'll go back to more traditional campaigning and more grassroots campaigning, and that's good. That's a good development. But my hat's off to the folks who were responsible for running these elections and managing the process generally. Every time I see a postal worker, I say, thanks, you guys did a fabulous job. They did. They did a remarkable job, and so did so many other people in both parties, and my hat's off to them.
So another thing that people also started discussing due to the way the election turned out was some people were considering the fact that they thought that Trump may have won the election if it wasn't for COVID or anything else that happened, like George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, because of how the economy was going and how everything else was going. Do you think that would have rang true, that if COVID happened, we would have had a different outcome and Joe Biden should be counting his blessings for COVID, or that Biden would have won either way?
Oh, this was all because of Trump. I mean, the reaction to Trump was strong, and it was reflected in what happened in the campaign. I mean, he's a strange guy, and not an honest one. Corrupt in many ways, dishonest. Really, in my opinion, a guy that never should be in politics, and was seeking to provide guidance for this country. It goes far beyond some of the things that you've mentioned here. So let's hope that that's the case, and we get back on track with people of both parties who are honest and decent and respect each other, and never get back to the kind of campaign that we just went through. It was really, really terrible, and I hope we don't see it again.
So do you think that in the future, since Trump was not a normal politician. He wasn't a politician to begin with, although there was some thought that he was going to run for governor of New York back maybe in like the early 2000s or 90s. He ran for president in the Reform Party. Do you think that his election to the presidency in 2016 kind of paves the road for other figures like him, and not only the Republican Party, but also the Democratic Party and the third parties? Do you think that kind of creates a pathway for others like him?
Well, I hope not, but it's not that we haven't had some strange candidates in the past. I mean, I was in college when Joe McCarthy was doing his thing. Another guy who, in my opinion, was despicable in many ways. Didn't care about the truth. Did all kinds of stuff to demean the process. Now, I'm a guy who's been in public life for a long time. Not only run for office and been elected and served, but taught at Northeastern University for 20 years. And taught what? Taught young people who I hope would and encourage to get deeply and actively involved in public life. And I believe deeply in this and believe deeply in American democracy. We've just had an example, still going on, of a situation in which Trump and at least some of the people that support him seem to be bent on destroying American democracy. I mean, I've never seen anything like this. I mean, one of the things that you learn in this business is that some people win, some people lose. If you win, great. Go out and do the very best job you can. If you lose, take your loss with a certain amount of grace and respect for your opponent, and continue to be deeply and actively involved. I mean, that just never happened in this case. Still isn't happening, and it's very troubling. Very troubling. I hope we've got it behind us, but we may not.
And we got about 2 minutes left. So with those last 2 minutes, is there anything that you've wanted to say that you haven't gotten a chance to say yet during this interview?
Yeah, let me say this with respect to especially the young people that may be listening to us. I'm a great believer in encouraging young people to get deeply and actively involved in public life. Being in a position where you can make a difference in the lives of your fellow citizens is very special, and that's what the American political system at its best gives us an opportunity to do. I mean, who was I? You know, a kid whose parents came from overseas to this country, and I had an opportunity to not only be the governor of my state 3 times, but at least run for the presidency. That's very unusual. And it's an example of the American political system working at its best. We have lots to do, great opportunities to do it, and my hope is that young people in this country will get deeply and actively involved in our political life. There's nothing like what public service provides you with the opportunity to do. And I hope very much that young people will not be discouraged by this campaign, but in fact will be encouraged to get deeply and actively involved and make their contribution to make both this country and this world a better place. We've got serious problems ahead of us. Climate itself threatens the future of our planet. And I would hope that any young people listening to us will think very seriously about public service as a career. There's nothing like it, and I've been lucky enough to have an opportunity to do that.
Well, thank you, Governor Dukakis, for coming on. This has been Calling Out Controversy on WVCR 88.3 The Saint. And Governor Dukakis, thank you for being with us. It's been a great interview.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. Good luck.